Welcome to our hangout for today. We are some of the authors from the Spooky MG crew over at spookymiddlegrade.com. And we are very excited today because we have questions from an awesome group of students. They are the Future Authors Club from Bedminster School and one of our favorite teachers. I like to call her Miss Nikki, so that's what we're going to call her today. That's my favorite. She always says, "Why do you call me Miss Nikki? That's just my Twitter name." Well, that's your name today as well. So we have 4 awesome questions from these students. And first of all, we're going to go see who's hanging out with us today from the Spookies, give some brief intros. So first off, I'll be kind of moderating a little bit today. And my name is Kim Ventrella. I'm the author of these books, Skeleton Tree, and coming up, Bone Hollow. And I'm really excited about this one because I just saw the hardback like yesterday or the day before. Wow, so pretty. And that's a little bit about me. Let's check in with Sarah Cannon.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Cannon, and I am the author of Oddity, which is now out in a pretty paperback, which I'm very excited about. Yeah. Who else have we got on the call? How about Jonathan?
Hello, I'm Jonathan Rosen. I'm the 5th most popular author in my block. I'm the author of Night of the Living Cuddle Bunnies and the sequel From Sunset Till Sunrise. Both take place in Gravesend and a lot of spooky things happen. How about David?
Hello, I'm David Neilsen. I'm the author of Dr. Fell, The Playground of Doom, and Beyond the Doors. Gloriously spooky. Lindsay? Sherry, I'm sorry. What am I talking about? See? Let's go with that.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sherry S.A. Larsen. I'm the author of this book, Motley Education, and I'm excited because I just recently sent book 2, which is tentatively entitled Dead Alley, to my editor. Yay! What about you, Cynthia?
Hey, I'm Cynthia Reeg, author of From the Grave and its sequel Into the Shadowlands. Spooky monsters that are a bit misfit trying to prove they're monster enough. All right, back to Kim.
Ooh, that sounds amazing. I'm learning everything today. I've always thought of you as Cynthia Reeg. Now I know Cynthia Reeg. I've learned some new info. And let's tackle our very first question from the Future Authors Club. And did I mention this is an amazing group of students? We Skyped with them and they shared some of their writing with us, and it was very inspiring. We definitely have future authors in our midst. So their very first question, they would like to know what inspired us to be writers. So that is a tough one. Let's go. Who's going to be in the hot seat? Let's see. How about Jonathan?
What inspired me to be a writer is I always wanted to write. And a lot of my Skype calls, I tell the story that it started with me not liking a lot of movies that I saw. So I started writing alternate endings to make it more to my liking. And that just set me down the path from that.
Love it. How about, Sarah?
If I can get unmuted there. So I have been a voracious reader since I was old enough to hold a book in my hands. It was always my favorite part of life, both at school and away from school. And so I always found writing assignments really fun because I was trying to see if I could write something as cool as the stuff I was reading, you know? So yeah, I kind of always wrote, but I also hit a point where, you know, I was kind of moving around the country with 3 small kids. And I said, you know, what's going to happen if I don't finally sit down and write that whole book? And the answer was probably nothing. And that didn't sound like much fun. So I decided to go for it. And I think David is next.
Well, I've always wanted to be a writer as well as a performer. I just wanted to be some sort of creative outlet. From the earliest time, I was usually started out doing more of an acting, but I, without realizing it, was writing because I'd be writing the stuff that we would perform for the most part. And then something that I could never stop doing. I can't imagine not writing. It's just the ideas come and I want to get them down. So that's just sort of the life story of a writer. You just have to get your stuff out. Back to you, Kim, I think.
Back to me, huh? All right. Well, I do have some similar stories. I've noticed lately, more so than when I was younger, that every time I watch a TV show, I watch it, but the thing that really interests me is the story that I'm making up along the way for the characters I think is way more interesting. So I do think I've always had that impulse, and I was also inspired by great stories like everybody else. I really, really loved some of these, like the spooky stories, scary stories to tell in the dark. Roald Dahl, I don't have any of his short story collections, but I do love The Witches, and his short stories really inspired me. So I just thought it would be so cool if I could create a story as creepy and awesome as the things I like to read. And also, let's hear from Cynthia too. What inspired you?
Well, I'm much the same. You know, I love reading first of all, and then writing followed into it. So it's, you know, you couldn't keep the characters and the stories out of your head. And you know, maybe my first love would have been music, but I can't sing and I'm really bad at the piano. So instead, for me, words are like music, and creating them and crafting them and playing with them. To me, it's just so much fun.
Okay, and did we hear from Sherry yet? Did you tell us what inspired you?
Not yet.
Okay.
I think I've always been a very curious person, ever since I was little. And also kind of like what David, to build upon what David mentioned, just I've always just had this creative outlet. I needed something to express myself. And I started when I was really young. At 3 years old, I started taking dance lessons. And that was just as I got older, and I actually was told that I was pretty good at it and I was going to be moving on. I actually realized that it was another form of telling stories, because my dream really was to be a choreographer. That's what on Broadway, just give me, you know, a floor, some sheet music, some dancers, and we create a story. So I think I always wanted to do that. And then life happened and I wasn't able to pursue that career. And then I still realized was once I started having babies, I was always telling them stories. And then one day it hit me, well, why didn't I write them down? So yeah, I think I started wanting to write, not knowing it, but through telling stories through dance.
That's really interesting. So we've had several people talk about other interests, music, dance, and that goes right into our next question, which is, before you started writing books, what was your favorite thing to do? Jonathan, did it involve evil bunnies?
Evil Bunnies is based on a childhood incident that I have, but I don't want to talk about right now. The thing, I'm similar to a lot of everyone else here. I was also like David. I used to like acting. I was a theater major at one point, and that led me into really devouring movies. I started watching every movie. I'm really kind of a movie buff. I devour them. I watch everything and every genre, and I really got into that. And then, you know, storytelling led from that, you know, let me create my own stories instead of just watching what other people want to write and get out there. So how about Sherry?
Honestly, I think it's anything. I want to do anything that's creative. I've done everything from, like, I used to be a wreath maker. I used to sell at craft fairs, all that kind of stuff. I'm also a mural painter. I really like to paint. My kids all have murals on their walls of whatever. You know, like one of my kids was a goalie, so his favorite NHL hockey player, goalie. I painted him on his wall, and you know, I just think it's, like I said, anything. Baking sweets. I like to bake sweets. Don't like to eat them, but pretty much I'd say those were my favorite things, other than dance. But once I got older, I was a little less physically able to dance like that. So what about you? Let's see, David.
Well, I'm pretty easy. I've been an actor. I was an actor all my life. I'm an actor now, showing up in another production of Mamma Mia one more weekend. But that's just sort of, I've always been an actor. And from that, writing came out of that. In fact, I first started writing screenplays and plays before I started doing books, the thought being that I would then be in them, because that's all we write about, right? No. So theater and acting. Cynthia, how about you?
Well, I have lots of different projects I like. I'm kind of like Sherry. I like some artistic things. I've done some painting and crafting and all that good stuff. But I also like athletics. So I like to play tennis, do that fairly often. I'm no Serena, but, I try my hardest. And yeah, I like to stay active. And I think from sitting around writing so much, I think it's good to keep your body active too, because that keeps the blood flowing to the brain. So, all right, how about you? Pam, or I'm sorry, Sarah.
There we go. I guess what I would say is that since I grew up on a diet of mostly fantasy, I got really curious about a lot of the things that people used to all have to make and do for themselves, but that a lot of us don't really do anymore. Um, so, I'm kind of a Jill of all trades when it comes to hobbies. I like to garden and see how much of my own food I can grow. I like to sew things and knit things because it's really fascinating to kind of see how fabric can get made by human hands. Um, I like to bake. Baking bread is something that's not very easy to learn to do well. Like it takes some time. And all of those kinds of things are just fascinating to me because we used to all have to do them or, we died. So it has to be something you can learn to do. So my mistakes are almost as interesting as my successes. Let's see. Who hasn't gone yet? Have we all gone? No, Kim hasn't gone. Have you?
Me, not yet. Well, it's so funny how similar we are because everybody's talking about art and drama. And when I was younger, that's totally what I was into. I was big in drama club. I was big into art. I brought my little prop, and this is what I would do all day is just kind of doodle. So like every notebook I have just has like tons of doodles of all of the weird stuff I was into. I was trying to pick out, it's totally weird. There's like John Lennon's grave. I was a huge Beatles fan. So yeah, all kinds of interesting hobbies. I have occasionally gotten into weird crafts too, needle felting, and then I had to bring this guy out once again because he's so weird. This is my Harry Potter made out of dog hair. So sometimes I like to do some weird, interesting things like that, but mostly. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. It's interesting. We're all similar, but have lots of differences as well. Okay, now we're getting into the really tough, meaty writing questions. So I hope everyone is ready. Get prepared. Here we go. How do you choose the characters and the point of view for your book? That's a really, really good question from these future authors. So in the hot seat, first of all, let's go to Sherry.
For me, how I pick my characters, I usually get, most of my stories are character driven, and I usually get some sort of an image of a character, whatever it might be. Then I usually sit back and try and think, what could I make different about this character, whether it's physically or emotionally or, motivation wise or what have you. And I come up with a bunch of different ideas, and then I try and match them together. I actually have created it's a character development pamphlet, booklet kind of a thing that I usually give for free. It's one of the choices that my newsletter subscribers can ask for. It's actually like a 40-page little book. So, and it gives all these different things that you normally just don't think about to try and make your character unique or different. And then I also have secondary characters. So sometimes you can use a secondary character to make your main character even more unique, or more interesting, or what have you. As far as point of view, that is one I struggle with because I really, really, really like to write in two different forms, like third person, past, and usually it's close, third person close, and that's what Motley's written in. And then I also like to write in first person, past tense. And both all I want to say all pretty much all the novels that I've written, the two that I've published, I wrote in both different point of views. I had to see what it felt like. And then I ended up with the third person. It just felt more like I had more freedom to express things. You know, I liked first person, but being middle grade, it just felt better for my main character anyway. That's how I did it anyway. So let's hear from Jonathan.
Also, yeah, I think very tough question. To some extent, I probably don't have a 40-page guideline about characters, but to some extent, all my main characters are me when I was a kid. To some extent, the way I felt about things, and I'm sure that's the same with a lot. You know, you put a lot of yourself in there, but just how I would react to certain things and what type of personality they would have, for the situation. I should put a lot more thought into it, but really that's what I do. I try to just think how I would react and how, what character best suits the story. As far as point of view, it's funny. I enjoy reading third person stories. I love them, but for myself, I really like first person. I just like the immediacy, and I like to put the thoughts in, the person's thoughts, what they're going through at the time. So for me, first person, past tense works for me just because I get to, put in a lot of what they're going through and what they're thinking about right then at the moment. So that's what I enjoy doing, at least. How about you, Sarah?
Well, I would say that I go through, a couple of different steps in that process. So, when you're writing a book, you can write about anyone that you want. So I usually start by thinking about, all the different people who are special and who are interesting to me in my community. I think about, the many students that I've taught over the years. I think about my neighborhood. I think about, so far my books have been set in America. So I think about what do I think is wonderful about being American and living in America? And it's that there are so many different kinds of people here all interacting together and making up one whole. And then I also think about wish fulfillment a little bit because, for example, the main character of Oddity, Ada, she grew up in the same town, lived there her whole life, knows everybody, has poked her nose in every corner. Everyone knows who she is. I moved a lot as a kid. So I never really had that experience. And I've had friends that I go into a store with them and the mom of their prom date from 20 years ago and is in there and is like, hi. And that's never going to happen to me. So it's really fun to write about somebody that's, a hometown kid. And also I find that my secondary characters tend to be the same kinds of people that are important to me and my family and our everyday lives. So there's almost always somebody that owns a local restaurant or a coffee shop or, the kind of place that you kind of go every day to check in if you live in a neighborhood that you can walk around in. Because those are the people that we know, care about, talk to, and see every day. And they're also really useful in stories because they always know everything that's going on. And I write in first person a lot because I like that immediacy, that sense of being, in and with the moment. But Twist, my book that's coming out in January 2020, is written in third person because there are more kids whose heads I need to be in, whose homes I need to be able to show. It just didn't lend itself well to a first person narration. So let's see. How about Cynthia?
Okay. Yeah. Tough question. And it's tough to tell people that aren't writers how it works because it kind of just happens sometimes. But as far as characters, I brainstorm a lot, whatever idea sprouting in my head, and and a character usually starts stepping forward, and I like to hang out with them. I wrote an example about taking my two main characters in from the grave on an airplane ride one time while I was writing the story, to just figure out how they would each react. Because when you get to know your characters better, like Sherry was saying with her worksheet that she goes through, then you're going to know how they're going to react, whatever the situation is, what they're going to say. And so that's fun doing that. And I'm starting that with a new story now. So I'm still really getting to know the characters. As far as point of view, I agree with Jonathan. I'm a first person point of view. I have written some of my novels in third person. But for me, first choice is first person, because I love becoming that person. I guess it's kind of like some of the acting you're talking about. I become that person in the story. And so that's what I really enjoy, is the first person. So, all right. How about David? Have you talked yet?
No, not yet. But I'm going to echo what a lot of everyone else has said here. Characters for me, my main characters tend to be versions of myself, how I would react, but usually then colored in a certain way. How would I react? But if I was really a more aggressive person, how would I react? But if I was very, very shy, or that sort of, the characters each have a little dimension and difference than just plain old boring me. As for my auxiliary characters, I am often not those characters, but I still take on that. I give them that something, that this is someone who has a trait that she always does this, or he always does this, or says things in this way, and that starts to color who they are to me as I'm going forward. More interesting for me, part of this question is the point of view. I've been battling that recently. The book I'm writing right now, I have gone back and forth multiple times trying to decide. It's currently, and I think it's going to stay, in third person, but I spent a long time in first person. But what I found, and I have written my first book that hasn't been published, but got me the agent, was in first person. The others are in third. I found with this book, as I was trying to write this one in first, that there were just things I was going to want to do that this character might not even be in that scene. And like sometimes you can kind of get away with where you hear it secondhand or something, but I realized I wanted to kind of give this third person so I could really go farther than where this one character may be. It all affects her, of course, but I want to move beyond her for some of the settings, I suppose. And then, Kim, what say you?
Well, first of all, you have confirmed all of my suspicions that you actually are Dr. Fell. So I knew it all along, and now it's been confirmed. So everybody knows for sure. And just what you said about POV is so true. And people have started to, hint at, it really depends on the story. So some stories are going to work better in first person. Others will work better in third. For me, I have this deep, abiding love of third person. I just think it is so versatile because you can go in really close. And to me, it can sound pretty much exactly like first person, especially if you do a lot of free and direct speech. For example, you can say something like, he walks to the store. How dare she say that to me? Then he does this thing. So you can sort of put the thoughts in there, right? With free and direct speech. Don't have to say like he thought, she thought. It's just there, it's flowing. And to me, it can feel almost like first person, but you still have the versatility to take sort of the camera lens, and instead of having it right up close inside your character's head, you can pan out and you can describe some other things in the world. You can use a more authorial voice if you want to, which kind of means that, usually when you're writing, so even in third for me, a really close third, I'm writing in the character's voice, even though I'm saying he or she. So every kind of description is something that only the character would notice, and I'm describing it in the character's words. But you don't have to do that always in third person. You kind of have that leeway, so you can pan out sometimes, and you can use a little bit more authorial language, words that you choose. Maybe you're trying to be more lyrical or poetic, or you have a specific reason for doing that at certain points. So I really love the versatility of third person, but I do use first person on occasion as well. And I've been experimenting lately with doing some stuff where it's like letters or found documents. And so a lot of that is in first person, but a little bit different. So that's really fun. And our last question is also about character. And it is, how do you name your characters? So we're not talking about who they are, just how do you pick the names for your characters? Let's see. Let's pick on Cynthia first.
Okay, well, that's a tough one, but yet it's one of the most fun things I think about the writing is coming up with characters' names, because the names really have to fit. And so, like, I had so much fun with my monster characters because this book is spooky, but it's also kind of kooky. So I wanted the main character, who's this monster misfit. He's a Frankenstein, but yet he's not. But his parents have named him this frightful name to make him appear more frightful. So he's Frankenstein Fright Face Gordon. But then there's like the evil principal, and you know, I had to come up with a fitting name for him. And I'm sorry, I'm dating myself, but I go back to a comic, and one of the evil characters was this kind of snaggletooth character, and so I named him, you know, Principal Snaggle. And I don't know, I just well, and then the second main character is a troll, who is evil, thinks himself as evil, and so of course he had to have an evil name, so he's Malcolm McNasty. So it's just it's taking yourself seriously, but yet it's still having fun. That's how writing is for me, and that's how I research character names. I care about my character names, but I still have fun with it. All right, how about Jonathan?
I'm afraid to say how much time I put into character names. I mean, I put in a ton of hours and hours just coming up with each character's name and what would suitable. And, you know, each one has a reason. Is the stuff I'm working on now, each one was, I researched, and each one has a little reason for doing it. And even if the reader never figures out why it is, I know. So it's important to me why each character is named what it is, and I'll see if they can come up with it. But, you know, I look at the traits, I look at the settings, I look at, you know, the history of certain things, and I do a lot of research about what I want to name those characters, what's suitable for the story. Kim, let's go right back to you for this.
Jonathan, you're putting me on the spot here. I'm just waiting to go last, but now I'm on the spot. So I don't put quite as much, I think, thought into it as Jonathan does in the same way. I tend toward kind of more old-fashioned sounding names, and I just want them to be kind of unobtrusive and, I guess, more universal sounding in a way. Although Stanley in Skeleton Tree, we have Stanley and Mirren, his little sister. And I did a weird spelling for Stanley. He just doesn't have an E in his name. And the UK publisher was like, why doesn't he have an E? So he does have an E in the UK books. But I didn't really have a reason except that he lives in this everyday world setting, but there's just one thing that's askew about his world. So I thought maybe let's just make him have an everyday name with one thing that's askew, just like the world that he lives in. And then for Gabe and Ollie, I just chose names that felt right for their character. It's just an intuitive process for me. And a lot of times I'll just kind of go through the alphabet in my head and think of all the A names and all the B names and all the C names. And finally, when I settle on one that feels right, I'll just go with it. So it's more intuitive. I don't necessarily have any special meaning behind the name. I just go with whatever feels right. Sarah, how's your process?
Oh, I have so much fun with naming. And this, for me, this is part of my pre-writing process, my research process, which we also talk about sometimes on these chats. Because if I'm setting a book in a certain place, like place is usually very important to me. Again, as someone who's moved a bunch of times, so I have memories of places I've lived that were very different from one another. And so I will actually go and I'll research like the demographics of a community, like what kind of people most commonly live there. And then I'll research, you know, last names that are common to that area or to a specific cultural group in that area or in general. If it's set in a certain time period, I'll look up, like Twist is set in the 80s. So I wanted to pull from names that were popular in the 1980s that would resonate with people, like parents my age that were reading books aloud to kids, but also kids who are like, I don't know anybody named that now, you know. It kind of reminds them that the book's not set now. Oddity was a ton of fun because a lot of people disappear in Oddity. So I thought, well, people will name their kids after people who disappeared a lot. That will be a thing. So I actually took a poll online. I said, tell me your grandparents' names. And I used those to cast a lot of the characters from Oddity. And then I made sure the one kid who had moved there from out of town had a really like uber modern name to differentiate him from everybody else in town. So I have a blast with that stuff, to be honest.
And let's give a big thank you to Miss Nikki's Future Author Club for sending us all of these great questions. And also, if you are, yay, thanks. But if you are a teacher or a librarian out there and you have students, whether it's your future author clubs or a regular class, whatever it is, we would love to set up a Skype or a Google Hangout with them. And then what we're doing now is we're answering the leftover questions. So even if they have questions left over after we hang out with them kind of live and in person, we'd be happy to answer those on our YouTube channel like we are today. So just head over to spookymiddlegrade.com and you can set one of those up. And thanks for tuning in or watching our recording today. We had a great time. And thanks to all of our authors for joining us. Bye, everyone. Go get some writing.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.